Hello and welcome to my conversation today. I'm with Eleanor Windsor, who is partner and director of knowledge at Irwin Mitchell. Hi, Eleanor.
Hi there, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you so much for joining me. So we're here to talk about, there was news out very recently about your team at Irwin Mitchell selecting Lexis+AI. And I'm really grateful for you chatting. Obviously, it's new. We'll go through how you're going to be using it, but I thought it would be really interesting for people to understand some of the processes that you went through, and also how you're going to be using Lexis+AI. So it's really great to chat to you today. So when did you sort of begin the process? First of all, do you want to describe what Lexis+AI does? Perhaps you'll probably describe it better than me. I've written about it a lot.
Absolutely. So the Lexis+AI tool basically is using the content that sits within Lexis, and obviously that is kind of managed content, and that's the really important bit for us, is that it is managed and trusted content. So it uses that content and it basically overlays an AI tool on top of that, and then it allows you to kind of do what you would expect with AI, really, kind of have that sort of chatbot type experience where you can ask it questions. You kind of treat it almost as a kind of a legal assistant. So it will help you with things like legal research. It will help you with drafting. It will help with summarising. And you know, there are extra things like you can upload documents to it and it will have a look at those documents, and again will do that kind of summarization in the context of the legal topic. So I suppose unlike other AI tools which are you know, sort of looking at the broad internet to get its input, so that was the really key thing for us. So yeah, that's essentially what the AI tool does for from Lexis.
And it brings all the sources, doesn't it, very critically? So it's grounded within Lexis content, and it brings the sources. So whenever it comes up with a result, you can check where it's.
And that exactly. So so it's not just kind of bringing up an answer for you that you then can't track back. And I think one of the really important things for lawyers is to be able to go back to that source, because ultimately, you know, any tool, any AI tool is it is an assistant. It's going to augment what the lawyer does. They will ultimately want to go back and check those original sources. They'll want to make sure that what they're being told is right. You know, and as I say, you know, it's an AI tool, so although it is very, very good, and they've done a lot of stuff, and I don't know, you know, the extent to which we get into all of this, but things like the whole it's the retrieval augmented generation. So that's, which is, I always get that wrong because I always think RAG, you know, red, amber, green, because that's what everybody's used in.
Well, I'm orange RAG, so that's great.
Yeah. But it is the fact that it's kind of grounded and in those legal sources and properly trained. I think that's the important bit, and as you say, being able to go back and check those is really important for the lawyers.
Do you know, I want to come back to how you get a bit more detail about how you're going to be using it. And but so did you go out, when in terms of the sort of selection process, did you go out for an AI tool, or how did you kick off the process?
Yeah, so it was a bit different from that in some ways. So we always had in the back of our mind that we would be looking for an AI tool that was legal specific. So we have rolled out within the business Microsoft Copilot. So we are using AI within the business anyway. And that, obviously, the Copilot tool at the moment, the one that the business is using as a whole, is the kind of one that sits alongside your browser effectively. So anyone who's kind of familiar with that, you know, you can get public access to it, but we've got a private, secure access to that. And that's great, and that's fantastic for things like summarising meeting transcripts or long documents, or, you know, articles and things like that. But because of the fact it goes out to the whole web to look for its content, if you ask it a legal question, you know, there's a danger that you get somebody's view from Twitter on that legal topic, and that's not really going to be helpful for you. So when we were going out and having a look at products, you know, one of the things in the back of our mind was, actually, if there was an AI tool that looked at trusted legal sources for us as well, that would be something we'd be really interested in. But we were actually in the process of reviewing our contract with Lexis anyway. So we've had a long relationship with Lexis. We'd just come to the end of a 5-year contract period. We've been partnering with them for that whole time, and we've done lots of work with them over that period. So when we looked at, you know, how things had developed, obviously we'd moved and grown with them, but they were then bringing in obviously Lexis+, which is their kind of latest development in terms of their broad tools, and then they were looking at the kind of whole developing AI on top of that. So when we went out and looked at the market, kind of looking at the AI tool as part of that made absolute sense for us.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because there's a lot of conversations around buy versus build again. There always is, but I do think, you know, for law firms, I mean, you're obviously a large law firm, but even for large law firms, I can see why they will be turning to their vendors and saying, you know, as trusted business partners, saying we're relying on you to provide us with technology that we can trust.
Yeah.
I can see why that would be,
And
you know.
it's behind a paywall ultimately. So there's, even if we did go down that kind of build approach instead, we wouldn't ever be able to access that data, because that obviously that is, you know, at the end of the day, the content, that's what Lexis and other providers, that's what they're all about. You know, that's their, you know, crown jewels effectively. So, you know, we would never, if we did build our own solution, we wouldn't be able to access that content. And certainly from our perspective, you know, as I say, we've partnered with Lexis for a long time, and they have provided that trusted and managed legal content for us. So yeah, having a tool that they've developed that sort of sits on top of it and looks at all of that content, for us kind of was a bit of a no-brainer in some ways, in terms of kind of moving to that next stage in a you know, a safe, secure, managed way. So yeah, so really good to have been able to do that.
What were there certain things that you needed to be satisfied of in order to move ahead? I think maybe you've touched upon some of, perhaps you've touched upon all of them even, you know, but so obviously you've mentioned it was grounded in terms of the privacy, data privacy, etc.
Yeah.
Or were there lots of considerations presumably and discussions
Yeah.
around?
Yeah, absolutely. So anything like this, when we do this kind of review, we go through quite a detailed, I'm sure nobody will be surprised, but a very detailed process. So we had our general counsel team involved and our data protection specialist, our information security team involved. So they were all looking at kind of how it was set up. They were looking very carefully at, you know, if any data was captured, where that was captured, how it was held securely, you know, how, you know, if anything is stored at all, how long it's stored. But essentially, one of the things that really appealed about the Lexis tool is that, you know, you're working within a session basically. So you're doing something within a session, and the any information within that session is only held effectively for as long as that session lasts. So we're not kind of, you know, keeping all of our data with Lexis, you know, that very much remains our own data. But it's about, you know, having that opportunity to really use their tool to be able to, you know, and the additional effort and stuff that they've put on top of that to sort of, you know, build that. I think is that, again, back to that kind of retrieval augmented generation, you know, that kind of, they've built that kind of legal expertise into it as well, that if we tried doing that ourselves, you know, the amount of time and effort it would take, and we wouldn't be able to access all the sources.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was
And
key for us.
presumably, so do work quite closely with IT on this as well, presumably? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So within our the way that we do it within our business, the kind of the AI and the way that we introduce these new tools is a combination between the specialist department, so in this case obviously knowledge, and then the IT team as well. So we work very closely. And I think AI is something, it's certainly changing. For knowledge, you know, AI is a huge development. You know, knowledge and AI are sort of converging essentially, and that is the future of knowledge management. So actually working really closely with our IT team and our innovation team, you know, that's really important for us. So we're really interested in the co-pilot stuff as well. Obviously that's not, you know, legally sort of based research, but actually from a knowledge management point of view, that's really important for us as well, because it's all about, you know, how you can kind of, you know, summarize things, how you can use that then to share knowledge more effectively. So that might just be, you know, information from meetings and things like that, which obviously isn't, as I say, not legal research and knowledge, but still really important from a knowledge management perspective.
And now there's been lots of, I mean, we won't digress. We'll be talking here for 2 hours, but now obviously there's lots of news of integrations with document management systems, knowledge, you know, so there's going to be lots of exciting things, I think, coming out of that will be affecting knowledge teams going forward, which we'll never have a conversation about. I think this collaborative approach has to be the way forward, you know. And I mean, it's interesting for knowledge. what this all means in terms of what knowledge management even means now. I think the role of KM has expanded so much. I'm not sure that it resembles what it used to
No,
be sort of 10, 20 years ago. I think
no,
it's
no.
utterly transformed.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's, yeah, that's really important, isn't it? I think in the old days, knowledge, professional support lawyers, etc., would be kind of sat in the corner with their head in a book kind of thing, and that's completely changed. It's given access to everybody. But with all of this, you still need those professionals, you still need those specialists. And I think that's the really important bit. So, you use these tools, but when you actually you get the data out of them, as I say, we've partnered with Lexis because we're comfortable and happy and we trust their data. But even when we get it, it's still up to the lawyers to check that and to make sure that it's accurate and to go back to those sources. And that's really important for us as well, because that's where our our practice development lawyers that we've got, come in as well, because they'll obviously be looking at what comes out of the AI and helping the lawyers to, use it in the best way possible.
Did you do a lot of groundwork? I mean, it strikes me, so I've had so many interesting conversations around this, and people have pointed out that lawyers are entrusted on so many levels with client, client information, and that you have to almost start from a point of trust, and they've been trusted. The whole profession is based on trust, right? So actually, but firms are taking quite different approaches actually in terms of generative AI and how they've, especially at the beginning, whether they banned it, but so did you do a lot of groundwork in terms of guiding your lawyers about how they should approach use of generative AI, including now this tool?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as you say, that is really important. I think we took the approach that to be honest, that banning something like this probably wasn't the answer, because actually, it's there, it's going to be there. People are going to use it. And the problem is, I think if you don't give them any guidance, they're going to go out and they're going to use the public sources instead. And that's far more dangerous as well. I mean, far more risk associated with that. The idea of kind of uploading, client information into a Google-based AI tool or something like that is really concerning. So we absolutely did. We had a sort of a task force that was involved in looking at AI, and that was again a collaboration between knowledge team, the IT team, but also our general counsel team as well, and bringing in our people team, etc. Because it's all about how this is a real opportunity for lawyers, how lawyers can develop and their kind of career path as well, and how they might want to, get more involved in this side of things. So we had a number of things that we did. So we had sort of the mandatory training that you would expect. We had, updates to our policies and our privacy notice as well. We had, within contracts with providers, there have to be the appropriate terms in there to make sure, that they're looking after any data that they've got securely, and that we're happy with what their processes are as well. So yeah, lots of work done on that. And I think what we've done, certainly, because obviously we're only just now about to introduce Lexis+AI as soon as that goes live. But what we've done so far is we've gone out there and we've done training for them, and we've focused on that mandatory bit, but we've also really demonstrated practical application. And that's been really important, because I think there's two things. One is it can look like it's out of their reach, that it's too complicated, it's like a bit of coding, it's too IT, it's too techy. So we've really shown it to them as a something that they can access, something that they can think about what questions they're going to ask. I mean, yes, we call them prompts, but ultimately at the end of the day, you want to make it as natural language as you can. So ask it a question, treat it like an assistant. And then, as I say, we have covered off all of the mandatory stuff with them as well, but really try to kind of bring it to life for them. And we'll do the same with the Lexis+AI. We'll be going around to teams, we'll be sharing it with them, making sure they get the training, they get the kind of practical application. Having kind of champions out there in the business is really important as well, who can talk about what they've done and the benefit that it's brought for them. So yeah, that's our main approach.
Yes, and I mean, I think that lawyers are naturally cautious. I mean, it's great that you point out that this is exciting and it's an opportunity. I think with the whole of generative AI, there's so much opportunity. I gave a talk to some school kids through this diversity program I do, and I was saying to them, some of them were interested in law and some journalism, and I was saying, there's a big sort of perception, perhaps maybe not amongst that generation, but that it would get rid of all of our jobs. And I
Yeah.
think creating, you mentioned prompts, you know, there's so many new jobs arriving. Do you with the prompts, are you, they provide sort of templates, don't they? So are you,
Yeah.
is it a case of that there'll be a lot of sort of, I mean, perhaps we don't need to go too far down this road, but they're going to be have a sort of a bunch of prompts available to help
Yeah,
them?
so yeah, so we've shared some that we've demonstrated, and then from there we've kind of created a library. So we've actually, one of the other things we've introduced recently is you know, Microsoft Power App. So we've actually used a Power App to create a prompt library, and that's enabled basically us to put in a kind of a, you know, really simple interface that allows people to kind of say, you know, what they're trying to do, and then for it to bring up prompts that might be helpful for them. So that's obviously kicked off with the kind of Copilot, so more general, I suppose, administrative type tasks, but that will build then and become more of a broader prompt library around the legal research tasks as well. And that I think is quite important, because again, it's that it's kind of giving them access to it, but also getting to a point, I suppose, where the lawyers are saying, actually, I've done this a few times, I can have a go myself, you know, I'll write my own, because you don't want them to feel constrained by having to use a library as well. So I think it's getting that balance right, really.
That's great, because obviously the sort of value of the return does depend on the how good the prompt is.
Yeah.
You know? And actually, it's funny because I think a lot of people, I'm guilty of doing this as well sometimes. But so think of it as just like a, you know, just like you would use Google. You know, they don't realise that the better the prompt, and we're not all natural prompt engineers. You know, and
No.
so it's really that education piece, isn't it? In terms of, so it's great to have those templates, and as you say, no doubt, as they start to become more familiar with how you know, create prompts, I suspect, yeah, as you say, that they're, you know,
Right.
more
And I think, yeah, and one of the things, so the way that we're structured in Irwin Mitchell is that we've got within the knowledge team, we've got our professional, sorry, our practice support lawyers. So they're like your professional support lawyers. So they're practice development lawyers, we call them. And then we've got our legal research team. Now, the legal research team, I mean, this is what they've been doing. They've been, you know, they are experts. They are information specialists. They you know, they get Boolean searching and all that kind of stuff. So actually they're in a really good position to be able to be creating, you know, those prompts and really helping people to understand what to look for. And that's one of the things that we quite often find comes through our research desk is, you know, I've been trying to look for this, you know, in what, you know, in a particular database or something, and I can't find it. And you look at what people are asking and you go, well, kind of not surprised you haven't found it, because that's just not the right thing to ask. But it's about kind of educating, really, I think. And so this approach now, I think it's kind of opened it up a bit like, I suppose, when, you know, Google was launched and people first were faced with, you know, having to search for things on the internet. You know, that was all a bit, oh god, you know, I don't know what to put in and everything. And now people just don't think twice about it. So I think we're back to that kind of position where we need to give them enough guidance, use the professionals who understand how they can make it as good as possible. And then I think what we'll find is that in parallel, the products will become better, so they will start to be able to interpret what people are putting in more as well. And I think that becomes really important, so that, you know, when you put in a very basic search, that it will say, you said that, what you probably mean is this. And I think this is where, again, the product from Lexis is really good, because they've done a lot of that in the background. So they've had their PSLs kind of working on it to interpret what these kind of queries that are going in and what they might mean, and alternative terms and all that kind of stuff, so that what comes out is more accurate. And that's really appealing as well.
Have you done, so you've presumably done a lot of testing on this, and how have you found the results? So, you know, have you been playing around a lot in terms of using prompts and also potentially sort of more general queries, and how is it, how have you found the accuracy? Presumably you've been sort of testing it against a more manual process. Is
So
that how you,
yeah,
is that
so with Lexis, we were doing our general review of the product. So we were using
yeah,
Lexis+ as a general tool. And there's been I think there's an announcement from Lexis. They had a few firms that were working on some piloting in the UK. So that we weren't actually involved in that. Unfortunately, that came just at the same time that we were doing our full review. So we were kind of in the middle of an RFP, and, you know, it was it was a bit difficult, because we couldn't really be involved in that and be going through an RFP, because obviously obviously there was a bit of a conflict there. So we haven't been able to do that. So we haven't been able to kind of push it out yet to everybody in the business. But we've been using the AI tool that we have got, the Copilot tool, to kind of set people up for it, I suppose, and get them ready for it. And then obviously as soon as we get access to the Lexis tool, we've had lots of demos from them. We've talked through it. We've had all the background information. We've seen it. We've been able to use kind of workshops to work through with them. Can you put this in? How does it look? And they've kind of been able to show us it. So we haven't had that ability to have a really good play with it, but we've got some of the people that have been working on it. I'm kind of in contact with them anyway, so I've heard feedback from them, and that's all been very positive, which is really good. So so as I say, timing wise, it was a bit of a funny one because of the time of the review and needing to get that sorted. And but really looking forward to having a good play with it.
And I mean, that's great. And in terms of so clients, so did you have to go through, so one of the things that comes up a lot, and again, speaking to law firms, different approaches, different reactions, different ways of dealing with it, but do you sort of go to clients and say, we're going to be using this, or have you been engaging them? Is it have any clients expressed any concern, or what's the reaction been from the client side?
Yeah, so I mean, clients are really interested in what we're doing, definitely very interested in what we're doing. And I think a lot of them now, when we get, when we're pitching for work, they're asking us about what we're doing in terms of our AI, and actually they really want to engage with us around that. I think the expectation is that we will use it because ultimately, they want us to be as efficient as possible. And if we can do things more efficiently, again, it means we can focus on the higher value work for them. So that kind of client experience becomes even better for them. So I think, in terms of kind of how we use these tools and how we engage with the clients, we're having lots of conversations with those clients about what we're doing with our AI and what our program is. And I think ultimately with something like Lexis, I think that becomes even more relevant, obviously, as we're starting to use it, not just for kind of behind the scenes administrative tasks, but for the actual core legal work. So I think more of those conversations will be happening over time. But there is I think generally a high level of interest, certainly amongst our lawyers and amongst our clients. And I think every part of our business now is starting to look at, well, what is the impact of AI in this particular practice area? And obviously we deal with personal clients and business clients. And I think it's equally valid across both. So I think it's just making it a lot more efficient for them.
Well, the way that someone described it to me is, once clients understand, once you have I mean, you're not going to be able to have a conversation with every single person, but so when they understand what it is that you're doing, very few of them object. For their one very large law firm, one of their clients objected until they had a conversation and explained, and obviously explained in terms of exactly how they're managing it, and from a data perspective, obviously that's absolutely key. So I think those conversations, if there are clients that do have concerns, about having a conversation and explaining, reassuring, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the approach that we're taking, is just being very open about what we're doing, and having those discussions with them, and really looking at this. And this is, for us, is absolutely critical, is that everything that we do has to be contributing towards a better client experience ultimately. And that's one of our obviously one of our key strategic aims as well, is to make that experience as positive as possible. So certainly having those open conversations.
Do you, this is a bit of a left field question, but do you, in terms of, one of the things that people always talk about is training, and actually I don't really know. I'm a former lawyer, I was a litigator, and there are certain things that I did in part of my training that I wish I'd never had to do, and perhaps would still be a lawyer if I didn't have to do that. So I don't really know where I sit with this, but have you had the conversations about how you train people if they're not having to do some of these sort of boring,
and that is absolutely, that is one of the concerns, isn't it? I think, as a junior lawyer, if you're not having to do some of these things because you can effectively use a tool to do it, how do you then still understand? And I think one of the things for us is that there will still be, when we do our kind of junior lawyer training, we are still encouraging the junior lawyers to do some of those, I suppose, like you say, those basic bits of work, because they need to understand how those are done. So they'd use the AI tools to support them, but they can't. It's a bit like a calculator, isn't it? I suppose, you can use a calculator, but ultimately, if you just pump numbers, press numbers into a calculator, you get a number, and you've got no idea whether that's anywhere near what you expected that result to be. That's not of
Mm.
any use to anybody. So I think, what we're trying to say is that when we look at our training, you need to understand those basics, and you need to have understood kind of the concepts behind it. But obviously, then you sort of introduce the AI to make some of those jobs easier. So
Right.
I think it will change some of that training. I don't think we're yet at the point where you can say it's okay, don't worry about it because AI will deal with it. Because the reality is, for anyone, whether you're a junior lawyer or a very experienced lawyer, if you use AI, anything that comes out of it, you still need to be able to go back and validate those results. I think that's important.
Exactly, and that's where we started out, isn't it? So you were saying, that one of the things that your lawyers need to be trained on is that they always need to check the output.
Yeah.
If you haven't had the training in order to, like you said, this calculator, I like that example because someone pointed out to me that in an exam these days, you all with maths, you wouldn't dream of not using a calculator, whereas once
No.
you weren't allowed to take one in, these things change. So but you do need to understand, and you do need to be able to verify, and for that you do need to I mean, the training is obviously essential. So
Yeah.
it'd be
But
interesting to see.
look at it, isn't it, and be able to say, well, does that look right, and
Yeah,
have that kind of sense of whether it is. And I think the only way that you do that is if you've had some of that basic training. So yeah, so I think there's I mean, it's back to almost like wherever you are in the business, it's really important that you've sat in and you've listened to the client calls, for example. You can't just get so far away from what's happening on the ground. And it's the same thing, I think, with the lawyers. They can't get so far away from the basics and being able to do some research. So we'll still be, even though we've got the AI tool, we will still be encouraging people to go in and do a search that takes you straight into Lexis library, and looking through all the cases and stuff. That won't disappear. So I think for us, it's very much, as well as some of those other tools and sitting on top of it, in the future it might replace some of those. But I think some of that core kind of those core legal research skills and legal skills, I think, are still important.
and then I suppose just lastly, so is this being made available to everybody across the firm, or is it
Yeah,
just
it will be. Yeah, absolutely.
okay? And it's envisaged that, so do you think it's sort of relevant to everybody else? I mean, you've got quite diverse practice areas. Is this something that, so you think everybody will be using it ultimately?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like you say, we have got quite a, we've got a
Mhm.
full service firm, and I think there are some people in some roles that may use it less than others. But I think generally speaking, it is certainly Lexis is a tool that's used across the entire business, and that's what that's what makes it really relevant for us. I think that we can roll something out that is relevant to the entire business. So there will be those who are in and out of it all the time, I'm sure, in certain practice areas, but in other practice areas, certainly having it available, I think will be really important for them. But yeah, our approach is, this, apart from anything else, might actually open up some of that content and some of those resources to people who've maybe not made the most of it in the past. So actually, we hope to see our use of Lexis+ generally increasing and improving as a result of this.
Would you know, it would be fascinating. I know, because it's really early doors. So I won't ask about ROI and time savings because I guess it's a
Mm.
bit early, probably.
Yeah.
Although I guess you've got some thoughts in your head. But so it would be great to revisit this. I think these conversations are so helpful as we're all learning about functionality, and I think it's so helpful to have these conversations for everybody. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and maybe we can, when you've got more familiar, when you've been using it for a while, perhaps we can sort of revisit and
Yeah.
like, how it's actually working in practice, and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the time savings and all of those things that
Yeah.
people are obviously
Absolutely.
really focusing on.
Yeah, that would be really good. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, anyway, really nice to speak to you. Thank you
And
very much
you.
for your time, Eleanor.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.